Hey, listeners, before we get into today's podcast, I want to thank today's sponsor, HelloFresh. Do you feel like you're stuck in a dinner rut? With HelloFresh, you get fresh, pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. Skip all those trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. You can now enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less with over 25 recipes to choose from each week. There's something for everyone to enjoy. All recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure delicious and simplicity. And I was just over there on their website checking out what they have to offer. And I'm telling you, it's making me super hungry. We have a prosciutto wrapped chicken, which I'm such a sucker for prosciutto. Chicken over garlic parm, which looks delicious. And even a beef tenderloin and brown butter veggies. There's a lot to choose from over there. It looks fantastic. And today they're offering our listeners a discount. You can go to the link in our show notes to get $80 off, including free shipping on HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit. Welcome back, Inebri-ites. This is Andy of the Inebri-art podcast, and we've been getting a ton of musicians on, but this is by far the musician who's involved in the largest band that we have worked with or recorded with, and this is Sam Hyken of the new Deco Ensemble.
Hi, Andy.
The one word I can screw up. Well, thanks for coming on the show, man. We were literally just talking off air that you're coming up to Boston because you did some arrangements for the Boston Pops.
Yes, the Boston Pops hired me to do some arranging for the band Train, who one of the biggest bands ever. So it's actually my first time being hired directly for the Boston Pops. They played a piece of mine a few years ago, but it's the first time they've actually hired me to do arrangements. So I'm really excited and wanted to go up and check it out.
Yeah, that's really cool. So how is that different? Because we talk to a lot of, rock musicians, pop musicians. When you're working on something like that, how does that differ from just like writing a song, like typically?
Oh, I think that arranging, it's still collaborative. When I'm arranging, really my goal is to elevate the artist's music and vision as much as I can. Less so than actually putting my own ideas. I always like to have kind of a voice within it, but in terms of kind of leading with big ideas, I think that the arranging process was something that's much more, you're much more playing an accompanying role, and it's just more of a dance. Like the trick is not to over orchestrate or under orchestrate. So it's also different, depending on the size of the ensemble. So the Boston Pops is full-time symphony orchestra. They're accompanying Train, which is a normal sized band. But the kind of arranging changes depending on that size. Like for example, the Boston Pops has 4 French horns, a full brass section, whereas the new Deco Ensemble, we're much more of a chamber orchestra. So kind of stylistically and how I write will really depend on that as well. So, and I think I answered your question.
Yeah. So new Deco is. So I'd never heard of you guys until I got the press release, and I was kind of like poking around. It seems like you guys kind of specialize in that, working with like existing music acts or like, playing more pop music opposed to like, kind of classical type stuff.
So we call ourselves a 21st century hybrid orchestra. We're an orchestra that's designed specifically for the 21st century. We are made up, it's really like a 2-sided orchestra, with the goal being ultimate flexibility. We are composed of, top conservatory trained classical musicians, but also the makeup of our group consists of a very high level rhythm section, really top session touring players that can read, but also just can really groove at the same time. So the idea is like ultimate flexibility, and our core repertoire consists of living composers from the 20th and 21st century, reimaginations of both classical music and contemporary artists such as Aretha Franklin, LCD Sound System, Daft Punk, as well as collaborations, as you mentioned, with artists of all genres and all mediums. So the idea is that an orchestra that can turn on the dime. We will do repertoire like Porgy and Bess and West Side Story and Billy the Kid by Copeland, and even Stravinsky's Petrushka, but then also, do, any collaboration with any kind of artist you can ever imagine. So it's that whole range of repertoire and flexibility.
And you guys are based in Miami, right?
Miami. We're going into our 7th season.
So you play there. It's not like you take the show on the road.
We haven't toured yet. We've only gone out of the state one time a couple of years ago for the Saratoga Music Festival, and we are doing a concert series in Akron this year. But the plan is to start touring. I mean, it's an undertaking with an ensemble of that size, but we've really built ourselves up where now we really feel we're in the position very shortly to take it on the road, either with one of our collaborators or on our own.
That's cool. So how did you kind of fall into this? Like, were you always into music? It always intrigues me because I feel like most kids are more into like rock or pop or rap or whatever. Like, at what point did you kind of fall more into the orchestra and the chamber music?
So that's an interesting question. So Giacomo Byros is my co-founder. He's the conductor of the ensemble, and both of us are Juilliard trained instrumentalists. I went to Juilliard for trumpet. I was always a classical trumpet player growing up with, always an interest in other genres of music. But, when you're a kid, it's just so easy to, for a parent to focus on the instrument that, you could really measure your progress in, as opposed to the creative side.
Yeah.
But, both Giacomo and I, had interesting experiences at Juilliard and, always started kind of looking for something else in addition to what we were doing. But we actually met as musicians in the Singapore Symphony. I was the associate principal trumpet, and he was the tuba player, and I was there for 2 years. And from when we were there, we were both roommates and living in Singapore, which is about as far away as possible from our homes. Yeah. Of course, we bonded and had similar taste in music, and we're always asking. It was a time when orchestras around the country, it was coming to light that there's a lot of financial pressure on a lot of these old legacy institutions. And so we started asking ourselves just, what is the future of this kind of music? And, what happens if we were, 50 years old and our orchestra folded and had to get another job against these Juilliard trained players? And so it just started making us ask ourselves all these questions about the future of music. And, I ended up in Miami as a member of the New World Symphony. Giacomo's from Miami. And, having been best friends living in Singapore, we just always knew we wanted to start something. And it took us a while to figure out what that was. But eventually that's what we settled on was, a hybrid ensemble that could really turn on a dime and play anything. And it really expresses all of our passions and all the kinds of music that we love, and our passion for musical exploration, and also our passion for give back to our community. We have education and outreach, which is a big part of what we do, including education concerts and our very own youth orchestra here. So it's kind of a combination of the love of our friendship and everything that we love. And it's taken us 7 years to build it to where it is, but we're really excited about our future and all the projects that we have coming up and are undertaking at the moment.
I really like that because I see so many kind of older establishments. Like there's a museum that pops to mind, and we worked with them with a pop-up art show one time, and they were like, oh, we're really excited to work with you young people. And I'm like, well, I'm like in my 40s, man. Like, I'm not young. And they're like, oh, we're trying to get more young people involved. And it's like, well, you need to do things that will interest them. And I've seen like orchestras play like music from Lost with, Lost playing behind them, or do like video game songs. And I think that's kind of like that same, it's far more approachable to a younger audience.
I think orchestras have been looking for a long time on how to bring in new audiences and, doing all sorts of things. I mean, pops isn't really something that's totally new, but our version of it is not the orchestra being as much of a backup, but really a collaborator within that. So we always like to elevate the music as opposed to just accompany the music. And I think that's what makes us different, and also our repertoire. But this may be controversial, but the idea of you're giving the example of a museum, an orchestra in a lot of sense sometimes can act like a natural history museum, and it's like every city doesn't necessarily need a natural history museum, but they need culture. And
Right.
what we're finding that we're doing is providing Miami something that really is of Miami and for Miami. I mean, it's a very international city with eclectic taste. Historically, there's really never, there was a professional orchestra down here, but it folded in the early 2000s, and it's never been able to kind of maintain that. So, our approach is something a little bit more progressive, I would say.
Is there like one music genre that you guys haven't like brought into the fold yet that like you want to, like, have you done metal stuff? And
we have not done metal, although there's a wonderful tradition of that. I don't know if you've checked out the San Francisco Symphony with Metallica.
Oh, that was exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So that's it's been done, and like we haven't quite done it yet. It's interesting because the album that we have coming out with Larkin Poets, our first roots rock and roll collaboration, and we've done more like on the pop rock side, but really like in terms of rock and even bending sort of towards the country, more blues side. That was the first time we'd ever done that, and kind of a genre I didn't even think we would ever tackle. But metal is definitely something that's interesting. I guess the only metal we've kind of done is we did collaborate with this artist, Scary Pool Party, who is very eclectic artist and has everything from like like Renaissance pop music all the way to almost death metal. It's a very eclectic artist, and one of the tracks we collaborated had that kind of real hardcore metal sound. So I guess we have done it, but we've never done it in terms of our concert presentation.
Yeah, it makes me think of like back MTV used to have that MTV Unplugged, and there's a few that like really kind of pushed the boundaries. Like they did a whole hip hop one. And, just to hear unplugged, acoustic hip hop was really interesting. And I think there's one with Korn where they have
the Jay-Z one is pretty famous. And it has like Jay-Z with the Roots is like great unplugged one. Nirvana is super famous.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, they kind of translated easily to an acoustic thing, just being more traditional band, I think.
I actually think that metal actually translates very well. There's a very strong correlation between metal and symphonic. I mean, if you hear like the guitar lines, I mean, it's just those kinds of lines translate so well to a string instrument. Any of those kind of metal rock and roll lines, any of those big octaves, it translates so well. That's why I think that album with San Francisco and Metallica was so successful. So yeah. I'm definitely down.
And if you think about it, I mean, it's the singing styles aren't too far off from opera. They kind of long high notes that they hold.
Totally.
So it's kind of operatic and
totally. Actually, I would say the one genre so far that we really haven't tackled with New Deco with an artist that I would love to is more of like Indian music and some of this like Indian like more crossover jazz kind of music like John McLaughlin's doing. I really love that stuff, and we haven't tackled it yet. So I would love to get into some of the music. You can see a lot of it. Like if you go to like Berkeley has, I think, like a modern Indian jazz ensemble, and that stuff is just so killer. And so I would love to like,
I'd never even heard of that's like a whole genre I never even knew existed.
It's very cool.
So do they use like sitars and that sort of thing?
Yeah. It's like there's like a tabla player, and then there'll usually be like, there'll be a violinist, and you have to check it out. I'm not really doing it justice, but it's like really like funky, cool music that I'm like super into and would love to do that with New Deco at some point.
Is there like a specific band that's on your list that you want to work with?
Many. I would say probably like one of my bucket list collaborators would be someone like Andre 3000. I just feel like, we've done an Outcast suite, and I'm just really into him as an artist. And I just feel like if you put him with an orchestra, like what could come out of his mind, and that kind of collaboration would be very special. Other artists that, would love to collaborate with, like Brittany Howard is someone I'm a huge fan right now. Anderson .Paak, of course, is also another artist that's like really on my list.
And where you work with your best friend, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask his name again. Giacomo. That was in my head. I'm like, but I'm not sure if that's right. I'm notorious for screwing up names. So is there ever like concessions or conflict where you're like, oh, I want to do like outcast type thing, and he's like, oh, I can't stand outcast, or like how, like what's that kind of working situation like?
Our program, I mean, we never really programming anything unless we're really both on board with it. And there'll be times where he'll be more into something than I am, or vice versa. And we'll each give if one of us is really into an idea, we can usually sell the other person on it. There hasn't really been an artist or a suite or a piece that one of us is really loved and the other one is really hated. We always find, even if it's like a strategic reason why to do something, whether it's for leveling up the ensemble or an artist that we feel is going to bring the right attention, or will be really just a great collaborative partner, even though we're not into their music, we can usually sell the other person and never really move forward unless we're both comfortable with it. So there's it's, I always go back to the the Queen movie, Bohemian Rhapsody, where Freddie Mercury goes to make his own album by himself, and he realizes it's that push pull that is what makes him great, and it's not just just his idea. And that's something I always have, whenever I'm like annoyed that Giacomo's not into an idea of mine, I'm always thinking that's what makes the magic. And I think our collective collaboration on programming is really what's been our formula for success.
And I think that's one of like the important things about being best friends and working in collaboration with someone is they tend not to pull their punches. They'll be like, that's a terrible idea, we should not do that. And if it's a real like good friendship, then you don't take it to heart. You're like, okay, he's because my partner in Inebri-art is my best friend, and when I first brought the podcast to him, I'm like, I want to do an art podcast. He's like, art's visual, that's stupid. And I'm like, all right, good point. I'll come back. And so that's how it became about creativity and talking to creative people. And but you're right. It's like that kind of, is this idea good? No. And you're like, all right. Has he ever brought something to you where you're like, oh, I don't know, and then at the end you have to be like, all right, you were totally right. That was.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know, like musically. I mean, there's definitely been many ideas which I fought him on, just like holistically about the ensemble, about like the organization, that he's ended up being right, and I've eaten good crow on. But like, I don't think musically there's been something I've been that resistant to. I'm pretty open. Like personally, I'm pretty open minded. I think out of the two of us, he's probably the harder sell.
Yeah.
In general, but it's good. I mean, I'm like, if it was up to me, too many of my ideas would get through. And it probably wouldn't be nearly as successful as it's been.
So when you're putting together an orchestra like this, how much consideration is there to, all right, we need like X number of violin, and how many clarinets do we need? Like, how do you break that down?
So we have a very specific size. It's really like technically in the classical world, in terms of the acoustic makeup of our group, it's called a symphonia. So what that means is it's one of everything in a small string section. So we have one flute, one oboe, which doubles an English horn, two clarinets, bassoon, and then one French horn, one trombone, and one trumpet, and then strings, percussion, piano. But then we augment that with electric keyboard player, electric guitar player, electric bass player, drummer, and then also like an aux world music percussion person as well. So that's our general setup. When we play in like bigger halls like the Arch Center, which is a big performance center down in Miami, we'll augment the orchestra and have more strings, and sometimes double up on the brass to have a more sizable horn section. And then when we play in smaller spaces and or smaller events, sometimes we'll break it down even further. So we'll do like a string quartet with just a couple horns and then the rhythm section. So that's really the range. It ranges as small as 15 all the way up to 40. And the instrumentation is pretty much the same for each version of that.
I was just thinking back to you brought up Queen, and rock bands are always going through their drama because there's different attitudes and egos. Is that magnified in something that size? Like
I think the orchestra, there's always been a general hierarchy within an orchestra. I mean, it's like, that's why like an orchestra is like great for teaching youth just about about just organization and leadership. And usually the way an orchestra is you have your section leaders, and then the section leaders talk to you have the concert master, who's kind of the general under the conductor. We have a very open line of communication with our musicians. It's not just like Giacomo's up there being the dictator and everyone just listens. Everyone is free to give comments, etc. I think with any large group of people, there's always dynamics, but I think our orchestra is really a family, and people truly care about each other. And initially when we started, I used to do all the arrangements for the ensemble, and that included all the suites. The Outcast, you see, like our Outcast suite, our Queen suite, that's online. I did those by myself, but then about season four, I invited more members of the ensemble into the writing process. So now I write all of these kinds of suites or new pieces, not necessarily the guest artist arrangements, but these new suites with members of our rhythm section. And like opening that up has gotten more buy-in from them. It's improved the work, and this year we're opening that in further. And as we start to explore like original music by the ensemble, we're going to really invite that process to anybody in the orchestra who wants in. Organized by me. You need a chief in terms of like organizing those kinds of processes.
Right.
But I think that the more we can open up creative output from our musicians, the better.
It's funny that you referred to it as a family. Immediately made me think of, I was a band geek in high school, and woodwind, clarinet, saxophone, and I still stay in touch with those people. I was playing poker with one of my best friends who was the drummer in the band, and reconnected with the tuba player not too long ago, and it really is. There's something that really brings you together when you are creating something collectively.
Playing, working through music. I mean, there's no collaboration like it. I was just talking about it with Larkin Poe on an interview we did, which is for me as an arranger, before our guest artists arrive, I'm usually about 2 weeks before working on the arrangement. So I'm like living within their music just constantly for 2 weeks. And you leave that experience of just like listening to them nonstop, this like intimate action. You leave feeling like you know them, or you have some sort of connection to them. So when they come, it's like, so I now created this accompaniment collaboration for their music, and at the same time been listening to them. So there's like this immediate connection that happens in friendship that just happens so organically, just from that process. Before we even said hello, even met each other in person. So it's music is an amazing. It's a universal language, and it's the greatest.
Do you ever get like you say you feel like you know them? Have you ever been like surprised, been like, oh, this is totally not, they're totally different than what I had envisioned personality wise? Or is it usually pretty?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't feel like I've ever been really surprised. You know, I think that the ones that you think are going to be a little bit more difficult, or like, it's not going to be as smooth of a process, but we really haven't had that. Maybe like 1 or 2 times has it not been ideal. Usually we just have these wonderful magical weeks when so many of our artists have never played with orchestra before. So it's, they get just that experience, and it's just all hugs and kisses. But, the more, a couple more seasoned ones, people are people, artists are artists. So,
yeah, but
it would be the ones that, if I were to tell you, you would be, that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's funny that like, we're like pushing 260 episodes, and we've met so many people. And I've always said that my favorite episodes are the ones where like a stranger comes in and my friend leaves, and we get bigger and bigger names on, and they're so nice. They're so nice. And the people who I have had on the podcast in the past where I'm like, ugh, they're not coming back, have all been like really local and like small time. It's, I don't want to say small time because that's borderline insulting, but just lesser known or not working on the same level as some other people. And it's just like, wow, like how can you have that kind of ego and personality and only
that's the way it goes. That's actually that's the way I think so too. You really know a pro when you see it. And like, you take, I keep bringing it back to Larkin Poe just because we have an album coming out with them, but Rebecca, who's just Rebecca and Megan, both of them. But they're both such stunning performers, but like they're also just so incredibly tenacious and professional. They come in, it's like an amazing attitude. It's patience. It's, you know, just great communication, and like really hard work. And it's like, that's why they are where they are. That's why they're having this success. But it's like, for me, it's like watching that kind of leadership and that just kind of being on, you know, all the time, you know, in rehearsal, like keeping the upwards of professionalism constantly. It was like a learning experience for me and my own leadership, you know, for the ensemble. Just, you know, that there's never a reason to communicate shitty. It's like, if you can do it, you know, you can do it. So
you said you guys are gonna be working on original stuff. Is that more nerve-wracking even from like a business standpoint? Like, is there like, because Plymouth here, we have a huge music scene, but 98% of it is cover bands because that's what the bars want to keep people in. Like, do you have that concern where like, oh, maybe the crowds won't be as big? Or,
well, it's still in the context of, you know, every concert that we do, it's really a journey of sound, and we start an energy when we usually start our programs with more like living composers, and usually end with a suite, and the collaboration kind of happens in between that. You know, I don't think, you know, at the moment we're looking to replace that, but it's more just augmenting a bit and adding that element and adding that level. Now, I think, you know, when you're doing original music, there's always that vulnerability that's different than, you know, when you're covering or arranging someone else's music. You know, we did do an original work this year, which was really well received, and, you know, people had been asking, really, our audience had been asking for it too. So, you know, I think that, you know, it does feel vulnerable, but at the same time, I think that our ensemble has a voice, and we have our own ethos in terms of the way we play things and the way we sound. And I feel proud that, you know, collectively we're going to come up with our own original music, and I think that we have to take that plunge. I don't think, like, on a business we're trying to replace that, but, you know, we do want to have that as a new element in our presentation.
Nice. So you have the new, you're going to be on the album? Is that for the whole album, or are you just working on a song? Sorry.
So Lark and Poe was our, last year we did an entirely live stream season with limited audience, and they were our second artist of the year. And they came down, and we just had a wonderful week with them, and it was really well received, and we all felt it was magical. And, you know, they asked for the hard drives and wanted to take a look at what they had. And like, before we knew it, like they sent us a mix of probably our favorite song from that collaboration. And they let us know they were really interested in releasing the performance as a live LP, and immediately we said yes. So the album, it's that's coming out, well, today's the 16th when we're talking, but it's coming out tomorrow on the 17th. And it's the live collaboration that we did in Miami last December.
So when a band like them reaches out to you, do you reach out to them? We
reached out to them. They were an artist we were interested in having as part of our season. So generally, you know, when we're bringing our artists down to be our guests as part of our season and perform for our audiences, we're reaching out to them. We have had artists in the past reach to us for different recording projects. But generally, you know, when it's our season, we're inviting them as our guests.
Yeah. And so, you know, my band reaches out to you. We decide to collaborate. How do you then interpret that into an ensemble? Do you work percussion forward, or do you start with the strings? Like, how do you kind of make that all work?
So my process is, like, the first thing I do before I do anything is I'll transcribe the song and just put it down on paper. I use Sibelius, it's a notation program. You know, I'll put out all, like, you know, melody, drums, like everything, at least so I can have something to work with. And also by transcribing, I really get to know the music very well, and I get ideas as I go. And sometimes I'll put those ideas in as I'm transcribing, but I'll put as much as I hear. And what I also do when working with a band is I'll listen to as many recordings of the performances as I can find. So whether it's a studio version, whether it's a live version, or different live versions, and find inspiration from those versions. Sometimes it's like a really strong line will be added to like a live recording. It's like, oh wow, they added these for this line for this tour, and I'll incorporate that. Like, my goal when we're bringing a guest down is for an artist to come and feel like all they have to do is like play as they normally play, and boom, you have an orchestra in back of it. And it's just like elevating that music. So that's why I'll usually like figure out like what is the form, like that's obviously the first thing, but it's like what is the version that we're doing, and getting that all down on paper and then adding to that process. It's not like I do strings first or anything. It's usually just like a matter of drafts. I'll kind of do just one pass and put in the ideas that I kind of hear, and then just go again and then go again and go again until I'm happy.
Is there like, are there bands that you wouldn't be able to work with, like a jam band like the Dead or Fish, that don't really have that kind of structure? Is that something that like you could,
I think that we've done you'd be surprised. I mean, we've done everything from like DJ. We did Walsh Fire from Major Lazer, straight hip hop. We've done things with much more open form. It's really just figuring out what is the way that we're going to communicate. So, if it was like a jam band, it would probably be just like, more section-based guideposts. You know what I mean? So there was that freedom where, there could be like, okay, the move is now when we feel it. But as long as like that communication is set up, and, it's very easy to translate that communication to like sheet music and guideposts. So I could say, okay, like vamp here, if this is an area that we're going to jam out, like here, just vamp and, repeat ad liberty, and then boom, the band cues or somebody cues, just in order to be able to, have that kind of performance and spontaneity.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's just like I was thinking, like I'm like, there's no way that you could do a band like that. They'd be like, oh, it's a guitar solo that goes off track for like 15 minutes, and
no, we do it, and it's like we just for that kind of moment, you put a big repeat sign around it, and you just wait for the moment. And we have a project that recently came out with a jazz pianist, Aaron Parks, and we did a chart of his that he did with Joshua Redman called Kronos. And there's this middle section that we just really kept open. And what we did was I just put like different elements in each of the parts, and the idea was that Giacomo could just cue in those whenever he wanted. And then so the arrangements were never the same twice. It wouldn't matter how it would cue; it would all fit over the same music. But it was just that idea of spontaneity, and then just he could control when the peak was coming in order to move on to the next section. So we've done all those kinds of ways of working.
Yeah, really cool.
I don't like to have any boundaries in terms of the kinds of collaboration, and like really being able to execute on an artist's vision. If the vision is to keep it more open and to give it a little bit more spontaneity, we want to figure that out within reason.
Right.
For playing with 30 people, how to make that possible.
That's really cool. Like that like you found that way to make that work. I love that. Where do you, like, we kind of talked a little bit about like where you kind of see this going, like you'd like to tour and but like grand scheme, like what, like do you want new Deco like franchises? Do you want to do like movie scores? Like,
we want to do everything.
Yeah.
That's what we joke about. I think that, obviously, Miami is a very big part of it for us. We want Miami to really be a destination. We want like you do Tiny Desk, you do Saturday Night Live. We want Miami and New Deco to be on that kind of artist check the box version.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like MTV, like you mentioned MTV Unplugged with the chamber orchestra. It's just like something that everybody does, whether you're Billie Eilish or it's like, oh, you go and do New Deco. I mean, I think that's kind of like, in terms of the collaborations for me, as well as, capturing all sorts of content and being able to, workshop new pieces. And that's another also, expanding the canon of orchestral music is really important to us, and commissioning artists for new works for our ensemble that would normally never get that opportunity. We love doing. So for instance, this year we're premiering the very first orchestral work by Robert Glasper. We did that with Corey Henry last year. We premiered the first full orchestral work by Kishi Bashi, which was about the subject matter was the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. So these are like new multi-genre like orchestral works, and so expanding the canon there is very important. And so serving Miami, taking our mission outside of Miami and touring and growing and content production and our educational programming. I mean, it's about content production, live concerts, our youth orchestra. It's kind of like all of those things, and just scaling them to as large as they'll be scaled.
So we were talking about how this is like a great way to reach younger audiences and new audiences, and you said that you'd done some live streams, or your whole season was live stream last year. Is that
Last year, yes.
yeah. Um, did you find that was reaching, a new younger audience? Like, was it just on Facebook? Did you do YouTube? Were you streaming on Twitch? Like,
So we streamed on this platform called Maestro. It was a relatively new platform. It gave us really great interaction with our audiences, where the audience could live chat. In our first show, we even polled the audience. They got to choose the encore. We did like a voting for that. We also,
cool.
It's kind of like Amazon style, where if a orchestral musician or there was a solo that happened, like their name would pop up. You click on it, and their bio would come in the screen. And that was like a really
cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. And we had never explored that before. And with COVID, we were forced to do it, so that was great. What was really interesting with the live stream was that 80% of our audience was outside the state of Florida. So, and we hit over 33 countries, and we're on almost every continent, I think, except for Antarctica. Although we did have like a board member trying to get us some outposts in Antarctica. But so we really did reach new audiences through the live stream. We do tend to have, a more younger audience than pretty much any other institution in Miami. And that was always it's interesting because like that was always the goal. Like, okay, in the beginning, and really, when New Deco started, we were more of a classical chamber orchestra that just happened to play things like Daft Punk, and then that really evolved into half classical and a real rhythm section. Like really, like before was like our classical guys were playing drum set, and while it was cool, it's not the same. It's just not.
Right.
So I think that initially when we started the idea, we're going to play Daft Punk to bring in young people, but what ended up happening was that we were actually serving as this gateway for older audiences to learn about the music of Daft Punk and Outkast. And, you'd have all these people like, wow, I really love that Outkast. They would never heard Outkast in their life. And so it's like, wow, it's like, it's not just about bringing in young people to orchestral or classical music. It's actually about being this ultimate place for connection and enrichment for both like new and diverse audiences. So that ended up where it ended up going, which was to be this hybrid where all different audiences and all different people, backgrounds, musicians can connect. And it's like the orchestra has like traditionally been this thing which has been about like division. People go to a concert and they don't know when to clap, and it's high society, and like we're looking at it as this place for ultimate connection, where it doesn't matter who you are, what kind of music you play. It's like this is the place that we're going to come to, and it's going to elevate whatever music we're performing.
Yeah, I love that. It's it always bothered me that image of a cultured person was, I go to the opera and I listen to classical music, and I only drink red wine or whatever. And I'm like, that's not really cultured. You're very narrow-minded. Right. I'm like, you should be listening to Eminem and, drinking PBR and listening to classical music. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
It to me, it makes life so much more interesting because there's good music. I'm not a country music fan, but there's songs that have been like, hey, I enjoyed that. And, it's people get they pigeonhole themselves and kind of shut off a bunch of stuff. And I think it's great that you're kind of exposing both sides to new.
I mean, that it's you kind of really hit the nail on the head, which is like this idea of being pigeonholed, because that's how with Giacomo, that's part of our impetus. It's like, oh, we've been trained all these years to play classical music, and I was like, I don't really know if I want to play in an orchestra anymore for the rest of my life. Like that's what I wanted to do for a while, but I'm like, is this really what I want? And then, even as I mentioned before, as a kid, it's really easy to get pigeonholed because the classical kids generally play with the classical kids, the jazz kids play with the jazz kids, and like never the two shall meet. So that's when we started our youth orchestra. That was like the very idea is we're going to break that where like the same model as us, where we're combining the classical kids and more of the pop kids, and making creative output a really big part of it, as opposed to just playing your instrument. And that's just kind of another thing you do in your spare time. It's like that. So that's very important for us, that whole ethos of not being pigeonholed and being flexible and exploring genre bending musical exploration, we always used to say.
Yeah, it's and sometimes like bands that kind of do that sort of thing, like I was thinking Walk Off the Earth, did a cover of Old Town Road, which I don't enjoy that song, but they did a cover with handbells, and it's amazing. It is 100 times better.
Wow, I gotta check that out. I
Yeah,
gotta check that out.
it's so great. But kind of talking back to that, getting exposed to new music. I grew up on MTV and radio play, so you didn't really have, you were fed what the big record companies wanted you to get, but like if you put a little legwork in, you bought Circus Magazine or Hit Parade or whatever, you could find cool new stuff. I feel like that's harder in some ways now because it's not so centralized. Like, do you agree with that? Do you find how do you get exposed to new music that you haven't heard?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that, you're absolutely right. It's like, it's not as decentralized, and we're, more people are making music than ever before. It's like we're in this big renaissance right now of music making. So I think, for me, a lot of my sources, are traditional, but then I also, to find new artists, I go to places like, I do go to Tiny Desk or WKEX.
KXP, yeah.
Yes, and that's where I find there's a lot of great, music that's up and coming and not quite hit yet, but it's like right before. It's so many times when it's like almost every artist we have has had a KEXP, and that's what we'll listen to a lot of the songs to base the arrangement off, because that's usually like a very stripped down version of it. So those are a couple of sources. I love, I scour Tiny Desk, KEXP, Twitter, Instagram, follow as much as I can, like Pitchfork, NPR, all of that, as much as possible, and really try and be in the know of everything going out there, both on the popular side and the more independent side.
Is KXP the one that does like, I know they kind of have their shorts, Tiny Desk style sets, but there's one that they have like a list of really well-known songs, and then they'll bring in a band. And if you play, When Doves Cry by Prince, that's off the list. And then the next band comes in and has to pick from whatever is left on the list.
Oh, wow. I've never seen that. That sounds cool. I got to check that out.
And it's like I stumbled across it because I was really getting into this band called Mariachi El Bronx. And then so I saw this. I'm like, that's a really interesting idea. And then the next one I came across was Guar. And I think they did a Skynyrd song. I can't remember.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's
but
awesome.
I love stuff like that, and I think YouTube and streaming online, it really allows for some really creative ways for people to kind of get their music out there.
And even like, I know we don't like to talk about it, but even like these algorithms, I discover a lot of stuff through Spotify and through like them just kind of figuring out my tastes, and even if it's similar, or Pandora, things like that, it's, you don't like to think like the computer knows you, but hey, it's like that kind of similar checking the that it's, it comes right on your feed, and it's great.
Yeah, that's cool. So the album is getting released tomorrow. So by the time this actually goes up, it will be out, I think, about a week, ballpark.
Okay.
Where can people go to get the album?
All digital service providers, Apple, Amazon, Spotify. The videos are going to be on YouTube. The vinyl, which is it's mixed so well, and we're just so happy with it that the vinyl's been going pre-ordered off the shelf. So that's available both on Larkin Poe's website and our new new-deco.org, and new is spelled NU. new-deco.org, and you can order the vinyl and CD as well from our website, but it's on all DSPs.
And for our Miami area listeners, is new-deco.org where they can find your schedule and how to get tickets and all that sort of thing.
Yes. Yep. We got a show in October. Our full season begins in November at the North Beach Band Shell. We've got a great guest artist. We're not really quite ready to announce yet, but it's a big one, and we're really excited about it.
That's really cool. Well, thanks, man. This was a lot of fun. We don't get a lot of composers and classical musicians on the show, so it's really cool to talk. Get the chance to talk to someone.
Likewise, Andy. Yeah. Likewise, it's really good to talk to you.
And congratulations on the Boston Pops thing.
Thank you.
And enjoy your trip up here, man. So
thank you.
And that's pretty much it. And we will catch our listeners again back here next week.
Wonderful.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Enebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Enebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Enebri-art or at Enebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Enebri-art, and all the other shows on the Enebri-art Network, which you can find at Enebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.